see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
So, hi, it's Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogs on how to build a culture of empathy. And today I'm here with Emma Seppala, and thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and you're Associate Director at the Center for Compassion, Altruism, Research, and Education, or CCARE for short. And you're also an honorary fellow at the Center for Investigating Healthy Minds at Madison, Wisconsin. And I see you're also a contributing editor at Spirituality and Health magazine. So does that cover a little bit about your background?
Yep, I do some science writing for Scientific American Mind and other venues as well.
So what these dialogues are about is, how can we build a culture of empathy and compassion? And it seems to me that all your work is really kind of geared, not focused, but kind of in that direction. So what I thought we could do is maybe hear a little bit about your background, your research, your work at the CCARE, as well as the conference that you have, the poster there in the background, the CCARE conference.
Absolutely. So I've always kind of been interested in what makes people do good, help others, and how can science investigate what we call the antecedents of compassion, or what are the what does the environment have to be like? What does a personality like to be like to really increase compassion in people and a spirit of service? And so I did my dissertation thesis on that, looking at whether loving kindness meditation, which is a type of Buddhist meditation, can increase compassionate behavior in people. Most of the science writing that I do is about well-being or service, and just looking at what does science say about what happens when people do compassion? Do compassionate acts? Are they happier? And so forth. There's so many interesting pieces of data out there that are just showing us that a compassionate lifestyle is a happier lifestyle, is a healthier lifestyle, is a more fulfilling one, is an inspiring one for everyone around you. There's so much to be said about it. So I'm really excited to have joined the Center for Compassionate Altruism Research and Education, where we're focusing exactly on that. And the conference that you mentioned is coming up in July, and that's going to be bringing together some of the top experts in the field of research on service, altruism, empathy, compassion, to look at all the scientific data behind it. Should be of real interest.
So how did your interest get started in this area? Was there some kind of a moment of an aha moment, or was it like a slow development?
I think that when I was about 16, I think I experienced my first really painful episode in my life, and I started to realize that I can have pain, and that means that other people must have pain too. And for some reason, that was a big realization. I think that was the first time maybe that I developed an understanding of empathy and how important that was, and realized just how everybody's life comprises pain, and how it's easy to go through life focused just on oneself, but that when we do focus on others and how we can contribute, our whole mindset shifts. There's research showing that when states such as depression and anxiety are very self-centered states, so those emotions are there when we're focused on ourselves a lot. On the contrary, states of empathy and compassion are focused on others. But when we do that, it also shifts our well-being. So when we're focusing on others, not only do we feel better, we're also making the world a better place. And then, further research shows that when we see people acting in a compassionate way, we experience a state of elevation. This research by Jonathan Haidt. You might have experienced this if you've seen, sometimes you just see a father and his child, or someone helping an elderly person across the street, and you get like tingles, chills or tears, and that's a state of elevation. And likewise, further research by Jonathan Haidt shows that when we do see people helping others, we're more likely then to go on and help to go on in kind of a cycle, a positive cycle. So it started with a personal experience of pain and realizing that everyone experiences pain, and realizing that there are ways in which we can help each other, through those, and also that very way of helping others is a way that's fulfilling in itself, I would suggest.
So what was it about that experience of pain that was, how did you,
Sorry.
Sure, do you want to?
I'm not going to take that call. I just don't know how to silence it.
Okay, let's just let it.
Yeah.
Oh, there we
Sorry.
go.
I guess you can cut it out, right?
It doesn't matter. Maybe we will cut it out.
Sorry, I'll unplug my phone. Maybe that's the way to do it. Okay, stop ringing.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, it's okay. This stuff happens all the time. So, okay, then I'll just cut that. So, so it sounds like you had an experience of pain, and then you kind of had this realization that, oh, other people are having pain, and instead of being kind of focused on myself, maybe to get out of the pain, it was good to start focusing on others. And
it wasn't just to get out of the pain. I realized, I think, when you're a child, you don't really realize that other people hurt too. It was that realization, and it was so profound, and it just kind of made me realize that I want to be there for others. And as I started to bring more service into my life, I also started realizing that that's what brings happiness. A life that's self-focused and self-centered, which is also the life that society tells us to be. So in a lot of ways, I would suggest that a lot of the marketing agencies, for example, thrive on persuading us that in order to be happy, we need to have a bigger car, purchase a house, be very successful career-wise, perhaps, have an iPhone, all those kinds of things. Purchase, succeed, get powerful, get rich, whatever it is, find a mate. It's the answer to all your, everything. The truth is that, those things can provide some temporary benefit and some more lasting benefit, but that ultimately the most fulfilling experiences that we can have are ones in which we're contributing to others' lives. And that's, again, I speak as a scientist, and so I always say, don't believe me. Don't believe anything I say unless it's a product of your own experiment, of your own experience. This has been the product of my experiment and experience, and it's also what I would say, what a lot of research is showing right now. So I would say that, service is probably one of the most fulfilling things, and for some people that takes the form of being a parent. And I think that's why for a lot of people being a parent is the most fulfilling thing, because they're in a state of unconditional service and love towards others. So when I say service, I don't mean you have to go and necessarily feed orphans in the jungle in Africa only. There's so many ways to do so.
Yeah, so it looks like you're combining then the science, but you're also doing meditation and yoga and kind of real embodied kind of practices as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, for, some people think, okay, well, how can I be more compassionate? How can I be of service? For example, some people will say, I'm just so stressed. I can't even think about helping others. And I felt that way too earlier on, that I was like, well, there's just so much to do and things are so stressful. How can I even have time to do anything for anyone else? And it was by learning to take care of myself in ways that worked for me, which meditation and yoga have been great. Breathing has been really great. Like breathing exercises, yogic breathing exercises. For other people, it might take the form of nature walks, music, other things. So I'm not saying that's the end-all, be-all. I'll just mention, I've worked a lot with veterans, especially at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I was doing research on yoga and meditation-based practices for post-traumatic stress disorder and veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. And for the veterans and service members that I've met, I've been so incredibly impressed by the amount of service orientation with which they live their lives compared to most civilians, I would say. They're completely focused on giving, and it's funny because I often hear, people talking about empathy and compassion, but then I often wonder, wow, would you lay your life down for somebody right now? Because I actually know a lot of people who would, and who I've met through working with service members. But for many of the veterans who come back with trauma, they may want to continue doing service, but they're dealing with an intense amount of anxiety and trauma. They're probably the example of the utmost stressed individual, and so they're not able to give. And that's the case for many people, right? If you don't have the ability to give, then you won't be able to. And stress and trauma can do that, can impede that. But it's been a really beautiful experience working with them, because through the interventions that we looked at, which were yoga breathing-based interventions, Sudarshan Kriya in particular, we found that many of the veterans that were in the study felt a lot of relief from trauma, and then went on to do a lot of community service in the community, went right back to their passion, which is to serve. And that's been incredibly fulfilling. So that's kind of how I tie yoga and meditation into compassion, is that it can really help relieve some stress, some trauma, perhaps. Another way that it can do that, and this is something we're also looking at the center, is there are certain types of meditation that can foster compassion within us. It's kind of a bit of a training program, like a fitness training program, but for compassion. Dr. Doty, who's the director of our center, likes to think about it that way, and hope that one day compassion training will be just like physical fitness training that we do. So there are ways that we can shape and mold our minds through meditation as well, to have more of a compassionate outlook for those for whom that might be a challenge.
Yeah, so you started talking about the C-Care. Would you like to give a little bit of an overview of the organization that you're the associate director of?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education at Stanford was founded by Dr. James Doty, with also some funds from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And the idea was to really put compassion on the map in terms of research. So the center helps fund research on compassion, collaborates on studies on compassion in the brain, compassion interventions such as the compassion meditation intervention I was talking to you about. It's called compassion cultivation training that we have at the center. There are other forms of compassion trainings elsewhere. So looking at the research, but also we have this real educational component headed up by Dr. Leo Weiss, who has developed the compassion education program with Jimpa Thupten, who is the Dalai Lama's translator. And so they're actually developing a teacher training right now as well. So there's the research component, there's an education component, and then there's a whole outreach component, education for the public. So this takes the form of events, conferences like the Science of Compassion conference we're putting on, and also through our website, which is we're about to get a new website, but we're going to do a lot of education over our website as well for people who are interested. It's really bringing to life Dr. Doty's vision as well that he's had.
Yeah, and you're doing this conference in July 19th through 20th this year, 2012. The
19th
science.
to 22nd.
Oh,
Yeah.
22nd, yeah. And could you talk about that a little bit too?
Yeah, so the conference is going to bring in, leading experts from around the world who have done research on compassion, and really presenting their latest research and having a dialogue about how can we bring compassion more into the world. There are a lot of different aspects to that, such as some people talk about compassion fatigue, service providers such as physicians and nurses. For some of them, they might say, I don't want more compassion, I'm exhausted already. So just kind of discussing things like that. So how can you increase resilience? How can you apply compassion trainings perhaps in workplaces, in hospitals, in schools, and in the military even?
So it's really bringing researchers together from all over the country and, I don't know, maybe the world, to be in one place to kind of have panel discussions and dialogues about the latest research.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. So, and it's going to be absolutely phenomenal. When I looked at the lineup of speakers, my jaw dropped, because I've written about all of them in my dissertation, and I couldn't believe they were all going to be in one room.
Yeah. So, so with these dialogues, I like to ask people about what their metaphors for empathy and compassion are. The empathy is often described as the metaphor of standing in someone else's shoes, looking through someone else's eyes. And for me, empathy is like a cornucopia, in the sense that, kind of opens the door to connection with and the experience of other people's feelings and values and experiences. And I was wondering if you have a metaphor of what empathy is like personally for you, and or compassion.
Well, I would just say it's looking through your heart. And I think that's what I've seen in, great models of compassion that are out there in the world, that I've had the good fortune of seeing or meeting. I just noticed that everyone that they approach, they are very much looking at them through the heart, which means there's absolutely no judgment. It's complete acceptance and honor of each and every person that is encountered. And sometimes compassion takes on the form of gentleness, and sometimes it takes on the form of discipline. And it doesn't mean it's just all, rosy, because sometimes, love is something that needs to be expressed in different ways. But when you look through the heart, it's about the other person. It's not about yourself, and it's about how you can uplift that person and allow them to be their fullest potential.
And if you described it as a felt sensation, a felt bodily sensation, what does it feel like as a sensation?
I would say like a warm cup of tea.
And what is the opposite? What would you say is kind of a metaphor for the opposite of empathy and or compassion?
I would certainly say that. You mean in terms of sensation?
Well, the metaphor of it. For me, I could say the metaphor of the opposite of empathy is kind of being in a desert, like a lonely, like the Sahara, like nobody's out there. It's very monotone. It's very unpleasant. It's very lonely. So that would be kind of like my metaphor for the lack of empathy.
Yeah, I would also say probably a cold place, a cold, sad place. There's one of my favorite things that I discovered when I was doing research for my dissertation was that, that a sense of connection to others is actually incredibly, brings about incredible amounts of healing. It's just, it on the physical and on the emotional and mental psychological level, it's just incredibly, it's an incredible strength. Helps us just be happier, lower rates of anxiety, depression, faster recovery from disease, longer life. But the interesting thing was that sense of connection didn't have to do with how many friends people had. In fact, they could have no friends. But it's the internal sense of connection from within. So I think that's amazing in the sense that compassion can be there, love can be there, a sense of connection can be there. But it doesn't have to be that there's 5,000 people around us. It could be in a desert. But if you feel that love, if you feel that connection to others, human beings, animals, nature, then you receive all benefits. So
it's really about a sense of feeling connection, maybe even a sense of self-connection somehow.
That too.
And to all of life in a sense. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I would say also, ultimately, if you feel compassion for others but not for yourself, are you really feeling compassion? In the sense that what's the difference between your body and my body and someone else's body? You know what I mean? So, and I think that's a core component of it, and more people talking about self-compassion, and Kristen Neff has put it on the research map, and it's definitely an integral part of a lot of the compassion trainings, and maybe something that's more foreign to us in the West, where we have a more individualistic kind of society, and therefore we kind of separate ourselves from others, and so we can think others are good and I'm not, others are deserving and I'm not. That's a very Western thing, I think. But really and truly, we're all made of the same things. We're genetically almost identical and very, very similar to animals as well. So absolutely, compassion includes that feeling, same feeling for one's own self.
So it's really about that sense of connection then. It's like, how do we kind of create a sense of connection? And when you were saying that your metaphor for empathy or compassion is kind of seeing through the heart, how do you scale that up to society-wise? That's kind of like seeing through the heart is kind of like this individual view of empathy. I don't know, is that for empathy and compassion, or are you saying that that's the metaphor for compassion?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess if you were asking me on a personal level, that's how I... But if you're talking about science, empathy obviously has a different definition. Empathy has the definition that you'd mentioned, which is to be able to experience what another person is experiencing, whether it's a positive emotion, a negative emotion, being able to understand and see through their eyes. Whereas compassion is really being moved by someone else's suffering to help them in some way. So those are the scientific definitions, I guess. Um, in terms of scalability, I think what research shows us is that we do what people similar to us do, and that if enough of us are acting in compassionate, respectful ways towards each other, towards ourselves, towards society, towards our environment, we will influence others. That's just normal. There's a reason why everyone wears jeans most of the time. Everyone's doing the same thing as everyone else. If it becomes a norm, to be aware, to be kind, that's what it is. And you notice that if you go to a city, like when I moved back to Palo Alto, and you're at a stop sign with your car, and you're like, you go first. No, the next person's like, no, you go first. I mean, it's that kind of a environment where everyone is so polite. That's just what happens. It becomes a norm. It's a really beautiful thing. If you go to New York, you're going to experience something different. And I think it's the same thing with compassion, is that it can definitely become society-wide the more it's practiced, and then influence others, and it just becomes normal.
Yeah, it's like that. So to build a culture of empathy and compassion, it's like somehow we need to make it the norm. Like I know I come into a group, and I can feel the group energy. There's a whole ambiance, a whole feel, and I can feel if it's very competitive or hierarchical or very caring, and so there's a whole kind of aesthetic feel to it. And I think to build a culture of empathy, it's really how do we change the whole feel of of society, and I think that's what you're addressing to.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and through social psychology research, we know that there are norms in groups, and norms can change. It's that easy, as whatever's the norm. Like I grew up in France, and in France, in the university systems, you have exams that are proctored. Then you come to the US, and there's the honor system that your exams are not proctored. And the norm is that people will be honest. Now, if you did not proctor an exam somewhere else where the norm is to proctor, it's unclear whether they would act honorably. You know what I mean? But here it becomes a norm, and I thought it was so beautiful that they would have unproctored exams. It was really honoring people and trusting them to be honest. And I thought, wow, the norms here are really amazing and different, and really encouraging people to be honest and expecting that. And that's what happens. So.
Yeah, so if we kind of expect everyone, we create an expectation that compassion is just the way things are, that we create kind of this just, is it like an expectation? Like this is...
It's like a culture, And I mean, I just think, for example, Japan, right? Right after the tsunami hit, and there was no rioting, there was no looting, there was no stealing. People stood in line. I remember reading the articles with my mouth just dropping. I wondered why there weren't more articles, because you better believe that if this was in New York, or this is in Paris, or this is in London, or this is in, Moscow, I really do think we would have had all of those things happening. But they didn't happen in Tokyo. Wow, why is that? The norms there, the level of civilization that is happening there is amazing. It's beautiful. It's probably maybe the highest form of civilization that we know of right now. That people would act in that way. I remember a story of I think it was a U.S. Marine who saw a little boy who was just starving and orphaned, and he gave him one of his MREs, one of his military meals, and the little boy took it, and then the Marine was like, "Wait, where's your food? Why aren't you eating it?" He said, "Oh, I went and put it on the communal table, and then I went to stand back in line," which is where the Marine had found him, in line, number 100th in line to try and get food. Boy, even at that age, the boy knew that, no, I'm going to share this with my community. It just moves you to tears. But that's how we could all be.
It's
our societies.
To really think about the well-being of other people, to really foster that.
Yeah, in such a civilized way,
Well, we live in a society where we hear about companies and businesses and corporations that their number one goal is to maximize self-interest, or to maximize profit, which is a little bit like saying it's selfishness is the rule, and then those values kind of spread into society when we kind of somehow it seems like we need to kind of raise that awareness and say, no, the number one value is really about thinking about others as well as ourselves too, and holding our common humanity.
Absolutely. I think that's a question of education, but research also shows there's a professor at the business school at Stanford who's shown that our natural instinct is to help, and that we sometimes stop ourselves because we're worried about what other people will think. But that our first instinct is to help. And you can think about this. I mean, this happens to me sometimes, is that if it's a clean place and I see trash on the floor, I sometimes just have this instinct, like, I just want to pick that up and throw it away. Or I'm on a beach and there's a candy wrapper and I think, wow, maybe some turtle would eat this and die. Like, I could just pick this up and throw it away myself. And I do it sometimes, but I've also noticed, wow, like I do have this thought, oh, what do other people think about me? And this researcher has found that this is true, that we're instinctively, we want to help. It's the first thing we want to do. We see that in children. Children will help without thinking. They'll pick something up that you drop. And there's research, from the Max Planck Institute showing that as well. But with adults, we're worried, oh, maybe someone will think that I'm helping out of self-interest or that I want something out of this because of that norm of self-interest, which is not necessarily who we are at our very core. So.
Yeah, and there's also that aspect of, well, other people aren't thinking about me. Why should I think about them? Right? If the cultural norm becomes everybody's in it for themselves, then it's like, well, I have to protect myself too, because I can go out there and do all this helping and, clean up all the garbage, and other people are just going to throw it down. I'm going to be eternally kind of cleaning up after them.
Yeah. Well, if anybody really sits down and thinks about it, if they're still alive right now, there are a hell of a lot of people who've done a hell of a lot of things for them. Starting with their parents, no matter what the quality of their parents was, to everyone who has fed them a meal, everyone who has created situations and circumstances for them to be alive, to have a job, to have a home. It goes on and on. So it's really a mindset, and I think that oftentimes that mindset that's a small mindset that says everyone's out for themselves and I need to just protect myself and keep my money and keep everything. That's usually someone who's quite stressed, I would say. People who have taken care of themselves and have, a little bit of awareness about life and maybe have incorporated some wisdom into their life and actually done a little bit of service, they'll notice that, they have been given so much and that there's so much that they can give and that giving to others is actually the greatest wealth, and living in gratitude is the greatest wealth. And there's plenty of research on gratitude showing that as well right now, that it's just an amazing booster for well-being. There was a study that compared gratitude to antidepressants and found that it had the same effect on people suffering from depression to list 3 things that you're grateful for every day, or maybe 5 things that you're grateful for every day. So, I think that sense of smallness, of I have to keep everything for myself is an attitude that people have that comes out of a lack of awareness of all the blessings that they actually have in their life.
Yeah, so it's also kind of from stress and anxiety and fear. Kind of it seems to be something that kind of shuts us down and keeps us. And so we have to, and that's what your research there was about. Right. Was about the stress, I guess, of being in war and that kind of shuts you down. And how do you take people who are in such deep distress and fear and and loneliness, and how do you kind of open up that?
Well, the first thing is, of course, healing, And, I mean, there's research that shows that stress increases self-focus, and that's a normal, natural thing. When our ancestors were running in the bush, running away from a lion, they better have been self-focused. Those who weren't self-focused and were, daydreaming about something else probably lost their life. The problem is that nowadays we're in states of chronic stress, Animals are in states of acute stress, 3 minutes before they die, they're being chased, they're in stress, and then that's it, But for human beings, we can be in chronically stressed, and that can lead to chronic self-focus as well, which, we can link to anxiety, depression, etc. So the first thing is to address stress, and, in whatever way, whether that's through meditation, whether that's through nature walks or baths or reading or exercising. And then the second thing would be to engage in service, because as soon as you engage in service, your focus becomes much, much broader, and research has now shown how much it can benefit your life. And it takes us out of a very narrow shell that is, me, myself, and I, and my little world, my little apartment, and my little partner, and my little child, and my little dog, or whatever, and just really opens up your view and has enormous benefits physically, mentally. So just stepping out there and doing that. And I think for everyone, there are different ways to serve. Introverts who don't like to talk a lot, there are ways they can serve without, whether it's through writing or just physical help, aiding people physically or whatever it is.
So what are your strategies for releasing kind of stress and kind of anxiety for yourself? What do you do to kind of personally?
I would say I do meditation and yogic breathing exercises, yoga, take walks in nature, and just remember to be grateful for what I have every single day. And the only consequence that can happen of that is a big smile on my face and feeling of lightness in my heart. I remember to count my blessings as much as I can. And there's so many. I would think that anyone who's even been born in a Western country has won the lottery. And we have so much. And then, but for a lot of people not born in poor countries, they sometimes really understand the meaning of life because they understand that it's not that happiness is not necessarily derived from, wealth. Happiness is really derived from connection, from your family, from love, from, gratitude. So.
Yeah. So one thing I've noticed, I did a lot of traveling, third world countries, and the people in poor areas here in the United States are really living in a sense like wealthy in some third world countries, but there's like a pain of alienation here, in the sense that seems to be the most you can have some material well-being. But then if you're kind of feeling alienated from the rest of society, that there seems to be a real pain in that.
Yeah. And actually there's a study that's shown that the number one reason for seeking therapy and counseling is loneliness here. So, we have these great, beautiful apartments and big homes and whatnot here, but we live further and further from our relatives than ever before, more disconnected from families. Obviously, we know the divorce rates in the U.S. are very high. And perhaps in some third world countries where everyone lives piled in together and doesn't have any much personal space, there's also a sense of connection to others that's just automatic. Besides that, culturally, also we know that certain countries, especially in East Asia, there's more of a collectivistic sense about the world. It's not just about me and the whole world revolves around me, but about me as part of a community, me as part of my family, as part of my work community, as part of my school. There's more of a sense of community in identity.
Okay, so what you're saying is if we're feeling stressed, is have some kind of processes, ways of kind of doing stress reduction. Also think in terms of service, kind of doing things for others is kind of a way of kind of getting out. And if we're feeling stressed, to maybe not just think of maybe what the deficits are in our lives, but have gratitude for what's kind of positive, what we do have, and for how people have contributed to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. That would be. I would say the next thing would just be, engaging with wisdom. There's thousands of years of wisdom in every single culture that we are a part of, that can bring so much to our lives, And then finally, I would think, you hear a lot about live in the present moment, but I think one thing to realize is just how fast time is slipping all the time. You just look back on the past, it's like a dream. It's already gone. And it'll be the same thing for this present moment. And when we really realize that, there's no reason to waste any time not being fully present and aware and grateful and just doing what we can here. There's one veteran who has inspired me a lot, who said that when he was in Iraq, he felt that he might lose his life any day. So he, with that knowledge, he woke up every morning and lived every day to the fullest. Now that he's back, he does the same thing. And it's so inspiring to me to see that. And it's so sad when I realize that many people don't have that awareness. But if we all did, boy, this would be a different place for us and a different way of life. And so it's something that keeps inspiring me and that I hope can inspire others.
Yeah, so kind of that sense of fullness in life, kind of looking through our hearts and which I guess is that what creates that sense of fullness. Then if we kind of do that, we're kind of opening up, and the fullness would be just connecting with others.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And there's another study that's very poignant, where they asked, it was a large study, survey in the US, where they asked people, how many people in your life do you feel close enough to share a personal problem? And in 2006, the modal number, so the maximum amount of people answered 3. And then when they did the survey again, the first survey was done in 96, and the second survey was done in 2004, they found that it had dropped to 1, and that 25% of Americans said 0. And that means 1 out of 4 people that we meet has no one to speak to. And for me, that means it's always worth it to connect, smile, be kind to every single person that you meet, because you might be the first person that day for that person. And it's always worth it. And it'll be a nice experience for you. It'll be perhaps the nicest experience that person's had in a long time for them.
So it's really kind of an awareness that there's a lot of people in pain just all around us, and that kind of reaching out to them might contribute to their well-being.
Absolutely, as well as to whoever they end up touching, because they will for sure be, pass it on. There's research on that. And we'll keep smiling. So kind of win-win.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, okay.
It just makes realize that, maybe that's the purpose of us being here, because it seems to be the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah.
which is what another veteran told me, who is completely in service right now, helping other veterans. And when I've told him, his name is Bob Curry, and I said, "Hey, Bob, what you're doing is so inspiring." And he said, "It's the only thing that makes sense." And those words have struck with me, because it really is the only thing that makes sense in this crazy world. So.
In this crazy world, huh?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, this has really been delightful to kind of get to hear about your work, and your interest and compassion, and want to thank you for taking the time to share all this. And I hope we can kind of keep the dialogue and communication going here to really to build a culture that supports empathy and compassion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Edwin. It's been nice to talk to you too.
Okay, thank you, Emma. We'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.